Okay. Today we're going to start Daf Yomi Warriors. That's 76a on the top. I'm Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel. Shmuel was his teacher, his second teacher. He says, Nikev v'nistam. Nikev, if there's a hole, a puncture in his male organ, but it got sealed up. Kol shilu nikri v'nikra pasal bilav kasher. Now it depends. Does it open up again if he has an emission? So if that happens, if it opens up, then he's puzzled to get married, because that's considered a krus shafcha, that the zera, the semen, comes out from a different area. That means it's not going to has to be yorek achetz. It has to like shoot out, and this is just going to drip out through a different hole that he has. But if it's remains sealed, then he's kosher. Heviba Rava has this. He deliberates on this. Heviba. He asks the question, Heicha, where is this hole? If it's below the corona, that means that it's distal, further from the body. So then, if nichras then it could even be cut over there. It's not. That doesn't affect him. Ella ba'atara asma, must be that it's on the corona itself, and that was the issue. Okay. Itmanami Amar Mari Bar Mar Amar Mar Ukva Amar Shmuel. So another statement name of Shmuel, but just from different students. Mar Ukva, I think, was the head of the Bezdin. No, he was the head of the Reish. He was the Reish Galusa. Mar Ukva, I think that's what it says. Nikiv ba'atara atzma v'nistam. If there's a hole in the corona itself and then it got sealed, kol shilu nikri v'nikra, then it's possible. If when he has an emission, it opens up, then it's possible. We love kosher. Shalach le Rava b'rei de Rabba le Rav Yosef. So Rava, the son of Rabba, sends to Rav Yosef. Rabba and Rav Yosef were friends. This is not the same Rava as Rava and Abaya. This is Rabba's son, Rava. Rava, the friend of Abaya, was probably a cousin of his. He sends to Rabbi Yosef, Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu, Heichi Avdinan. How do you check to see if the puncture that he has in his body, if it got healed? So what do they have to do? He has to have an emission to see. Well, really, he can live with his wife, but no, he can't live with his wife because we don't know if he can live with his wife. So they have to check. They have to do this examination. You bring warm bread that's made out of barley flour, and you put it on his behind. And that will cause him to have an emission. And then you'll see how it comes out, if it comes through the puncture or if it comes through the normal way. Abaya says to Rabba, I'm sorry, who says to Rabbi Yosef, it was Rava's son, Rava, the son of Rabba, was asking Rabbi Yosef. So Abaya is the student of Rabbi Yosef. He says, are you considering everyone to the status of Yaakov Avinu that never had an emission? Is that what the standard here? And because of that, the only way that we can see if the puncture was healed was to put this bread on him. In other words, it's a very like what do they call these tests? Intrusive. This is it's as if it's an intrusive test. So Elamar Abaya says Mavrina kame big tzivainim. They bring in front of him women's clothing, and that should arouse him. And look at the big tzivainim is colored clothing. That will arouse him, and from that they'll have a mission, and then they'll see how it came out. So Amarava atukuli alma barzila hagiladihu. Now they take the opposite. Barzilai Agiladi, he was the one that in Tanakh, he's praised. He's not doesn't say anything negative about him. He was, on the contrary, he came when David was running away from Absalom. He came with food to feed him. I think his family is all the people that were with him. And then when David passed away, he tells Shlomo Melech, make sure that Bnei Barzillai, they should be at your table, and all of that. Anyway, our Gemara says that Barzillai Hagiladi, he was a someone that was aroused very easy, and he would have a lot of relations. Rashi quotes the Gemara Shabbos that says that David invited him to come to join him. He said, "No, I'm so old, I can't even taste the food." So they said, "What do you mean you can't taste food?" The Gemara says, in Rebbe's house, there was a woman that was 90-something years old, and she would taste the food. She was the taster. So obviously, the Barzillai Giladi was an 80 or something. So the Gemara says that because he was so I don't know if it's promiscuous, but he was so into having relations, so that he had aged to the extent that he was as if he was older than the 92-year-old lady, and he lost his taste. Okay, why is the Gemara quoting this here? We're saying that, is that what you think is going to arouse him? Just some clothing, some colored clothing? So the Gemara says, rather, that's what we're going to do. We'll use that bread, we'll put it on his behind, and that will cause the emission. Yeah, the Gemara doesn't suggest that he take it out physically, directly, by doing some sort of activity. And it doesn't suggest that you see a woman that's not dressed. It doesn't suggest either of those. It just suggests that either clothing or by warm bread. So it's interesting. There must be testing that they do today. Different tests. People have to get medical tests. This Gemara would probably be relevant. Tana Rabbanan. Nikev pasal mipnei shu sheises. Nikev, if there's a puncture in the male organ, so he's puzzled to get married because sheises, because it drips out and it doesn't shoot out the sperm. The nistam, if it gets sealed up, then it's kosher. Because then he's able to make a woman conceive. This is someone that's puzzled that returns to being kosher. When you say zehu, what are you excluding? You say this is, like there's something else that's not unrectifiable. That's lamute krum shalamach masmaka bereya dena krum. What happens is when you check an animal, the lungs of the animal, to see if there's any puncture in the lungs. So sometimes there was a puncture, but it grew a little scab membrane, scar tissue that healed up that puncture. Now, if that's the case, do we say that the animal came back to being kosher? As you see the puncture, but you also see the membrane that grew on it. So we say over there that it's not considered a real membrane that healed it. It's a scar tissue. We don't accept that. So when we say zehu, that this is something that could return to being kosher, that's excluding the animal that has a scar tissue on the lungs. Shalach le Ravidi Baravin la Abaya. Ravidi Baravin sends to Abaya, Hechi Avdinan. How do you heal the puncture that the person has? What do you do? What's the remedy? Mysinan Sa'arta, you bring barley, Mesartinanlai, and you have him scratch the area of the hole of the puncture. Mysinan Tarba, then they bring fat, V'shayfinan, and they rub it there. Umaysinan shumshana gamla. Shumshana gamla. This is some sort of worm. And umenaktinanlay. And they put it, they like attach it to the area of the puncture. Upaskinanlay laresha, then they cut off the head of this worm. What is it? An ant. There's a
picture too.
Oh, really?
It's like a mosquito.
The driver ant. Shum Shemana. All of them mean ant. Okay. Interesting. I think today they use, if someone has a skin graft, so they need the blood to flow through the new skin. So how do they get the blood to flow to the new skin? They use leeches.
Oh, really?
Yeah. To pull the blood into that new area of skin, because it will make its its ways through that.
How do the leeches know how to do this?
Leeches just know how to suck the blood.
Yeah.
So here, what they're doing is they're scratching it. It should bleed a little bit. Then it's going to grow this tissue, this new tissue. And then you put on this fat to help the tissue grow, something. And then they bring these ants to something, I don't know exactly, but and then they cut off the head of the ant. Do they remove do they remove the head afterwards? I'm not sure. Maybe they leave the head of the ant there. It's like plugs up the hole. It does disintegrate? Okay. That's a guess. They're guessing that. Okay. I'm okay with that. And V'daf Kesar, I mean, the Gemara doesn't say that it disintegrates. At least I didn't see that in the Rashis and stuff. Oh, at Rashi does say that. Kosman shuhaylachu bala. Bala habasar oila u'mischaber. As it disintegrates, the skin connects. Yeah, very nice. Okay. Aval parzala, Daf Kesar, they have to use a barley. They don't want to use metal to scratch the area to cause it to bleed. Aval parzala, but if they would use iron, the Aramaic for barzel is parzel. Mizraf zarif, it would swell. Probably means infection, cause infection. V'hani mili katan, this is only if it's a small hole. I assume it's talking about the hole, not the person. Aval gadol, but if it's a big hole, mikpule mikbal, then the scab will fall off. It won't work. Yeah. Okay. Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna. Rabba bar Rav Huna says, Hamatil mayim mishtei mekaymes pasel. Person has a second puncture in the male organ, so then when he urinates, it comes out from two areas. So then he's puzzle. Amar Rava lasilchasa like a brava like Abba. Rava says the halacha is not like Rabba bar Rav Huna, and it's also not like his father. Why is it not like Rabba bar Rav Huna? I guess because it's only. Here it's talking about the urine, and before we were talking about the hole would have been for the semen. Ra Hadamran, the son, which is Rabba, that's what we said. But Abba, what was the father? What did the father say? Rav Huna, that we don't want to accept. Damar Rav Huna, Nashma Masela Zubazu, Psul Zakahuna. Women that have homosexual, that they behave that in this manner, they should not marry a kohen. They're invalid. We don't paskin like Rav Huna. Rav Huna says this. We don't go like this. Why? Even according to Rabbi Lazar, that says that what makes a woman a zaina. We said that the modern Hebrew zaina it means a prostitute, would not be the biblical translation of Zaina. It says a kohen can't marry a Zaina. Biblically, that would mean, well, that's a machlek is what it means. But according to Rabbi Lazar, what it means was that any single girl that lived with a single man, but it wasn't for marriage, would be considered a Zaina. Even that very strict opinion, but that wouldn't prohibit these women. Hani miliyish, avalisha, but if it's a woman, pritzusa ba'alma, that's just promiscuous behavior, but that doesn't mean that she's puzzle. Yeah. Taisus here mentions, he says, what are they exactly doing? What are these women doing? So the Rivan Taisus brings says that they're taking the semen that they have from their husbands and they're putting it into their friend. He says, Taisus says that it can't be the pshat. That can't be the issue. He says he has because we have another Gemara that says that a person should not let his girls, should not let his daughters behave like this. Shmuel didn't let his daughters. Now Shmuel's daughters weren't married, so obviously they didn't have the semen from the husband. So it must be that it's not that severe issue that the Rivan was saying that's the issue. It's less of an issue. They're just like pressing against each other, which is that itself is what Rav Huna was saying was puzzle. Okay. Yeah, the Rambam says that the Rambam holds that this behavior is rabbinically forbidden. I think he says it's not biblically forbidden. It's a question if this is considered k'maisei eretz Mitzrayim. You're not supposed to behave like the way that they behaved in Egypt. And the question is if this goes under that category biblically, or if this is just a rabbinic extension of that.
I think it said maybe in Parshat Emor Kadoshim, like a man shouldn't lie with another man. But
Yeah.
I don't know what it says about
Right. So a man with another man is clearly a biblical
right.
prohibition, but a woman with another woman, that's a rabbinic. Either rabbinic or it goes under the category of the ways of Egypt. You shouldn't do. Okay. P'tsuadaka kroshavcha mutarim begiyaris meshachreres. P'tsuadaka. That is the man that we said his testicles were crushed, or kroshavcha, or his organ was cut. He's still allowed to marry a giyaris. It's a convert to Meshachreres, or a woman that was a slave and was redeemed, was released. The only prohibition is to marry into the congregation. That would be everyone else, other women. Regular Jewish women, they can't marry. They asked from Rav Sheshis. What about if it's a kohen? Now, a kohen is not supposed to marry a convert, but this kohen can't marry anyone else. Do we say that this kohen has lost his status when it comes to marriages, that he should be allowed to marry the convert? Does he still retain his holiness? Or maybe he doesn't retain his holiness.
Is it the term kahuna?
Kahuna.
No, okay.
And it's permissible. It's an interesting question. The Gemara is not suggesting, it's funny, the Gemara doesn't suggest, okay, is he allowed to go to the cemetery? The Gemara could have asked this question a little differently. Is he still a Kohen? It's not asking that. It's only asking specifically for marriages. So I assume that he's still a Kohen. And the question is, when it comes to marriages, is this, do we allow this? I'm not sure how it's this yes and this no. Okay. Amalei Rav Sheshis Tani Sur Rav Sheshis says, I'll bring you a proof. P'tsuadaki Yisrael Mutar B'Nesina. He has a brisa. The brisa says that a Jewish person that's a p'suadaka, not a kohen, a regular Jewish man, His testicles are crushed. He can't. He's sterile. So he's allowed to marry a Nesina. What's the Nesina? Nesina were these people that showed up in the days of Yeshua, and they said that they wanted to convert. Now it turned out that it was a fake. They were really from the Chivi. They were the Givonim. They were members.
Those are, the Gibeonites.
Yeah, the Gibeonites. So Yeshua made them.
They tricked
They made a deal. They made a covenant with a pact with Yeshua.
Yeah, they would
And
be like
because-
bricklayers or something.
Yeah, so even after they found
Choppers.
out that they were fakers, Yeshua accepted them because of that agreement that he had, because he didn't want to reject them now after. But he made them as water carriers and wood choppers. Yeah, later on, when the city of Noiv got killed, so then they lost their jobs because they were wood choppers and water carriers for this Kayanim in Noiv. They were upset. Was that in Shoftim? No, that was in Shmuel.
Oh.
It was when David was running away from Shaul. So he went to Noiv, and then they thought that Noiv was protecting him, was siding with David against Shaul. So Shaul had the whole city wiped out. So they were very upset with Shaul. And because of that, there was this famine. And they asked from Hashem, why is this famine? They said, because you didn't apologize to what you did to them. They said, how can we rectify it? So they said that only if Shaul's children will pass away. That's when they'll. So the Gemara says that they're not Rahmanim. They're not merciful. They don't gain anything from Shaul's children passing away.
Right, yeah.
It's not like they get their jobs back. They're just cruel people.
I didn't get that far.
Okay. Now, if you say, we said that a Jewish person can marry a Nesina, even though they made a decree that they can't marry into the Jewish people. But a Jewish person that's a Petua Daka is yes allowed. So Ikri can like this Chatenbam. There's a pasuk that says you're not allowed to marry from the 7 nations. Here we have people from the 7 nations. And nevertheless, we're allowed to marry a Jewish person that's a Petua Daka is allowed to marry. Obviously, he loses the holiness of being a Jewish person, and he's now permitted to marry someone from the 7 nations. So a Kayan should also be allowed to marry a Kayan that's a Petua Daka, also loses his holiness and should be allowed to marry a convert. Amar Rava says that what are you telling me? That has to do with the Jewish person's holiness. That's not what's going on. You confuse the issues here. We're not talking about that the lady didn't convert, that the Nesina didn't convert. Dilma Moilid Ben. Vazil Palach Lavedis Kechavim. Over there it's talking about they didn't convert yet. They're going to have a child. The child's going to go worship an idol. That's only if the father or the mother. That's if the mother is not is still a non-Jew, still from the 7 nations. So Kimegairi, Yisrael Shari. But once they convert, then it should be permissible. So why we say that they're not permissible? The Nesina, the Gibeonites. Well, V'Rabbanan the Gazru. That was only a rabbinic decree. What was the decree on people that could procreate? But if they can't, if a Jewish person can't procreate, they never made the decree anyway.
They gave an exception to that.
Right. So here we have a rabbinic law against the Nesina, but that's only on the Jewish people that could have children. But here's a man that can't have children; he's sterile. So he would be allowed to marry a Nesina, but that's because the woman converted already, not that she wasn't Jewish. Okay, now if that's the case, so what are you telling me anything about holiness? You're trying to bring a proof that a Kayan, that the Petua Daka should be allowed to marry a Gioiris, and you bring a proof from a Jewish person can marry a Nesina. The Nesina converted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it was only rabbinic, and it was just that the rabbinic decree didn't go on this person.
So
It doesn't
what's
tell me
the-
anything about the
what's the
holiness.
standard here? Is it a yid that cannot marry, that's infertile, that cannot marry into the
Yeah, but it would only be
congregation.
infertile because of an action, not because
Uh-huh.
it was sterile, born
Oh,
sterile.
okay. All right.
Yeah. Gemara says, "V'atanan mamzer menasinim mutarm leva zebazeh." You just told me that the issue is that the rabbis didn't make a decree on someone that was infertile, but it turns out that wasn't really the what the decree wasn't on. They said that a mamzer is allowed to also. Now a mamzer is not infertile.
Right.
Is allowed to marry one of the nasinas. So it says Elaki Gazer. We adjust this a little bit. Elaki Gazer Rabbanan. When did the rabbis make the decree? Biksherim, only on people that could marry the rest of the Jewish people. However, Bipsulim like Gazer Rabbanan. So we adjust what's going on over here, but it doesn't affect our answer. Our answer is to Reb Sheshes that we don't have an answer because this case has nothing to do with a kohen that's to a daka marrying a geiris. This has to do with the rabbinic law. What Rav Shesh's case is a rabbinic law about an asina. Hadar Amarava Lav Milsi. This, what we just said to Rav Shesh's, is not accurate. So biyosin I've become less lochasnas. This geiru islo chasnas. We had a pasuk of leitis chatenbam. You should not marry them. What's it talking about? Before they convert or after they convert? Talking about the 7 nations. We thought it meant before they convert. You can't marry them. But a Jew can't marry a non-Jew. Like this happened. Rava says it's not true. That's not what the pasuk is referring to. Pasuk is referring to even after they convert, you can't marry them. So if there's a pasuk that says you can't marry them, and then we say that, but someone that's a Petua Daka can, that must be because the Petua Daka loses his holiness when it comes to marriages, and he's allowed to marry even someone that's biblically prohibited to everyone else.
Procreate.
No, the not procreating had to do with when the decree that the rabbis made. Who did they make it on? Only someone that can procreate. Now we're saying it's not the rabbis' decrees that are only on this person. Talking about the standard Jewish person is not allowed to marry even a convert from the 7 nations.
Right.
Now we're saying, but someone that loses the standard holiness of being a Jew because he is a Petua Daka, he did this or had this accident, so he goes beneath that standard and is allowed to marry them. If that's the case, then a kohen that's a Petua Daka also loses that standard,
And
that
they
holiness, and can marry a
7
Geiris.
nations.
Yeah,
7
right,
nations also,
right.
and
Well, right. Yeah, it would apply to both. Yeah, Jonathan is asking if the kohen can marry a Geiris from the Nasinim. You're combining both the issues together. That's an interesting point. Okay. Master Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef has a question. What are you telling me? Well, your proof was that Leitis Chatenbaum was dealing with after the conversion, because before they converted, there's no such thing as marriage. A Jew with a non-Jew is not a marriage. So Leitis Chatenbaum must be that they did convert, and it is a marriage. The only thing is it's prohibited. It says, what are you talking about? It says Shleima married Chaten, the daughter of Parai. The Gemara says, well, I can answer that easy. Yuri Gairi, he converted her. So that's why there was a marriage, because she converted. The Gemara says, but we have a rule that during the days of David and Shleima, we had this before on 24, that you weren't allowed to take converts because we didn't suspect that we suspected that they weren't sincere. Maybe they're converting because of the nice Kiddush club.
Yeah.
Well, 1 second.
This was a degree by specifically David and Shlomo.
Yeah,
So
during
it's
that
temporary.
time, right.
They didn't accept any comments.
Right. They didn't accept converts during that time. So if that's the case, how does Shlomo convert her? So the Gemara says, Midu time el shulchan malachim. Shlomo could convert her, even during that time, because why would they convert? Because they wanted to eat the nice food at Shleima's palace, but she doesn't need Shleima's food. She was a daughter of Pari. She must have converted for the right reason. She doesn't need the Shleima's thing.
Egyptian
She has her own catering service.
Right. So Halei Tzrichale, she didn't need it. The Gemara says, how did she convert? Typically, the mitzvah Rishayni, she's a first generation Egyptian. It's not allowed, you're not allowed to marry. The Gemara gives us a good teretz. Maybe we'll say that all the nations were already scattered. And the Egyptians that live in Egypt are not really Egyptians. And so the whole prohibition of Egyptian and this convert and that kind, today someone comes to the Bezdin, we don't start asking them if they're Egyptian, or maybe they're Edom or Ammon or Moav. Well, everyone's been scattered. So maybe they live in that country. It doesn't mean that's who they are.
So Mitzrayim is also part of the 7 nations that were forbidden, just regardless of
No,
this?
Mitzrayim had its own issue. Mitzrayim had the first 3 generations of an Egyptian convert couldn't marry in. And Edom, right? Maybe we'll say that they got scattered. But Tanya, who was at Sancherev, moved everyone around. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Minyamin ger Mitzri hayali chaver mitalmidi Rabbi Akiva. Minyamin, he was an Egyptian convert. He was my friend from the students of Rabbi Akiva. Amar, and he said, Ani Mitzirishan. I'm a first generation Egyptian convert. Benasasi Mitzrishan, I'll marry a first generation Egyptian Egyptianess convert. And Asi Livni Mitzrishniya. And then I'll have my son marry a second generation Egyptian Egyptianess. Kadeshia Ben Beni Levikal. So that's the way the 3rd generation can get married. We see from the statement that the Egyptians still exist. Amar of Papa says, Anan Mishleima Lake of Anasiv. We're all getting worked up over here because of Shleima Melech. That's our question. Shleima Le Nasiv Midi. Shleima didn't marry them. From the nations, we quote the pasuk in Malachim, from the nations that Hashem told the Jewish people not to marry them, and they should not marry in you, because they'll make your heart stray after their gods. In them, Shleima attached himself in love. Now, in love means that it wasn't a real marriage; it was just love without marriage.
Did Sancherib also intermingle like the other 7 nations, like Ammon and Moab with?
That's what it seems. It seems like he moved everyone around in the whole world.
So I guess.
So the same thing would apply.
That rule is probably no longer applicable, I suppose, because we don't know which is which.
Right. However, from our Gemara, it looks like we're not accepting that, because we just brought up this proof from Minyamin that we're not accepting that. But in Shulchan Aruch, it is accepted. I think Taisus is dealing with that. So why does it say that Shlomo married? It says because it was such an intense love, the pasuk considers it as if he married her.
Whoa.
Amalei Ravina Ravashi. Ravina says to Ravashi, Va'anantanan. It's supposed to say, Va'anan leitanan hachi. We did not learn this. Rather, Pitsua daka krushavcha mutarim begeres mishacher sabanasina asiri. If you look at the Mishnah, it only said that they can marry a convert. It doesn't say they can marry a Nesina. Amalei says, according to Yol Taimei Chema Seifa. Why don't you read the Mishnah a little further? It says, Veinar Asur Mel Lava Bekal, Habanasina Shari. If you read the end of the Mishnah, it says they're only prohibited to marry into the congregation, but a Nesina is not part of the congregation. It sounds like they are mutter. It says, from this you can't learn anything. Not this way, not that way. No proof from our Mishnah. Okay. Amaini Umayavi, an Ammonite and a Moabite, Asurim, they're prohibited, and they're prohibited forever. In other words, it doesn't go away after a few generations. We're talking about marrying into the congregation, even if they convert. Aval nikevai sehem mutaris miyad. But the females, the women from Ammon and Mayav, they can, and not only they can, but it's not just their children, but it's they themselves are allowed to marry a Jewish man.
Yeah, I think a descendant of David.
Very good. Yeah, that's what we're gonna. You don't have enough trophies. Mitzvah daimian asir melad shleisha dairos echad zachar vechad nekevas. A Mitzi and an Edomite, they're only prohibited for three generations, but it applies to the men and the women. Reb Shimon Mates and the Kevas Miyad, Reb Shimon permits the women Mitzrim, the Egyptianesses, to marry immediately a Jewish man after they convert. Amar Reb Shimon Kal V'Chaimer Advar. Reb Shimon says, "I'll bring you a Kal V'Chaimer proof. It's logical." When it came to Ammon and Moav, that the males are never allowed to marry, but the women can marry immediately. So if the males are prohibited for three generations only, then for Kal V'Chaimer we should allow the females to marry immediately. Amrulai, they said to Reb Shimon, if what you're saying is a tradition, then fine. But if you're just trying to be logical, yesh tshuva, we have questions on that. It's not perfect. Amalahem, like he says, you don't have any questions. Halacha ani aimer. But nevertheless, I'm saying a tradition. I'm saying, halacha means like halacha l'mishim Sinai. Okay. Minani mili. Where do we know the summer Rabbi Yechanan? Rabbi Yechanan says Damakra. We have a pasuk. Ukarois Shaul es David Yotzi Lekrasa Plishti Yomer al Avner Sarat Tzava. Then Mizehanar Avner. When Shaul sees David going towards the Philistine, this is Goliath, he says to Avner, his general, he says, "The son of whom is this lad, Avner?" So he wants to know, who is this David? See, what happened was Goliath was taunting the Jewish people that no one can come out and fight him. If they would win, they would be their slaves, but no one can come. And it's been 40 days that he was saying this. Anyway, David was there bringing his brothers some food or something. And what's going on over here? He's letting him say this every day. I'm going to go fight. So Shaul says, who is this lad that's going to go fight with Goliath? Vayomer Avner, Chein nafshecha hamelech im yadati, v'lo yadalei, im yadati. By your life, king, if I would know. It means he doesn't know who he is. V'lo yadalei, he doesn't know who he is. This we're asking that Shaul doesn't know who he is. He loved him very much. Shaul already knows him from before. It says that Shaul had some sort of depression, and David would play the harp for him, and he loved him very much. Ella avua kamashel. Rather, he wanted to know who his father was. He knew who David was. He didn't know who his father was. He didn't know who his father was. There was a man in the days of Shaul that was old, come amongst men. It says that he was a general over 6 million people. 10,000, right? 6 million. So, no, 10,000. Is that 6 million or is that 600,000?
600,000.
600,000. Samach Ribain. He was a general over 600,000 people. That's a big. So he was an important person. So of course he knew who his father was. It says Hachi Kamashal. He knows that he comes from the tribe of Yehuda. Question is, Yehuda had two sons from Tamar. Remember, she had twins, Peretz and Zarach. And he was asking, this fellow, does he come from Peretz or does he come from Zarach? Imi Peretz asi Malkavish, Melch Peretz lasis derech ve'machem biyadei. If he comes from Peretz, then he's going to be a king, because a king can breach any wall and make his own path. No one can protest. But if he comes from Zerach, then Chashiva Balma, then he's just an important person, but it doesn't mean that he's going to be a king. My time Armalei. My time, what's the reason? Armalei, Sha'al Alei, Sha'al Alei. Oh, my time Armalei. My time Amarle Sha'al Allah. I think what it means is, why did he say to ask on him? That's what it means. Why did he say to find out who this child is? It says Vayilbash Diksiv, because the pasuk says Vayilbash Shalas David Madyai, and it says Kimi Dasai. What happened was Shaul had armor, and like protective armor that David was going to put on, and the term that it uses for the armor, it says Madyai, which means his clothing, his armor, but that expression means that it fits him.
Right.
It's made to his size. But it says regarding Shaul, that he's a head taller from his shoulders and up. He's higher than all the people. So how is David fitting into this clothing? So it must be that something happened, some sort of miracle, that the clothing fit him perfectly. So Shaul understood that this person is going to be a king. So he starts asking, is he from Peretz or Zarach? If he's from Peretz, and he'll be a king. So Doeg Hadaimi, that was an advisor to Shaul. He asking if he's fit to be a king. Why don't you ask if he's fit to be even a part of the Jewish community? My time, what's the problem? The Kasim Rusa Mayavi is a descendant of Rus, the Moabite woman. Amalei Avner. So Avner responds to Doeg, what are you worried about? Tanina, we have a statement in the Mishnah. Amayni v'lay amaynes, mayavi v'lay mayavis. Or Brisa, that it's only the men from Amin, the men from Mayav. So Doeg responds, if you're just going to look at the masculine term, then we'll go through other places in the Torah and you'll come out with other halachas that are not accurate. It says mamzer, it doesn't say that a mamzeres can't marry in, it only says a mamzer. According to you, is that how you want to read it? That a mamzeres is allowed to be married into the congregation? He says, no, mamzer ksiv, mumzar. It's a mamzer is a compound word, that there's a blemish of being a stranger. So it doesn't have to do with just the male. So he says, what about mitzvah v'lei mitzvahs? An Egyptian, but not a Egyptianess. Says Shani Hachid in the first time of the Christ says, no. You're confusing things. Over here, the reason why Ammon and Mayav was not allowed to marry in was because the pasuk says, when the Jewish people were passing by them, they didn't bring them bread and water, which would have been a kind thing to do to travelers. For travelers, they didn't do that. And who do we have that complaint on? Not the women, because the women wouldn't go out to the battlefield to bring the people, their food provisions. It would have been the men that would have gone out. So
this is when they were leaving Mitzrayim?
Yeah, but this is on the way into the land of Israel. That's at the end.
Where there was no clouds of glory.
The clouds
Then
of
she'll run
glory
out to the men.
went away after Aharon, I think.
Right.
Right. So this is their.
Not hospitable.
And the man obviously wasn't there.
So Doeg says, 1 second. You're telling me that the women weren't supposed to go out, but let the women go bring food to the women.
Right.
And so therefore the prohibition is against the women as well.
Right.
Says Ishtik.
It's just
So Avner was quiet.
strange that it's assuming that it's the way of a man to, I guess not meet them with bread.
Right. Now, the way of the men was yes to. And because they didn't, then we made a prohibition that they can never marry into the congregation.
Right,
They're not kind
it should have applied to the women too. The
Yeah.
men don't give it to
to the women, right? That's the point.
Yes, women are in the tent.
So this is the basic question. Do we have a complaint against the women of Mayav that they didn't bring food to the women? Or do we say that they didn't go because they were modest? That's what we'll see.
Okay.
So Ishtik, but Doeg is quiet. He doesn't know any answer. Not Doeg. Avner is quiet. Miyad, Vayemer Melech. The king says, Shalata ben Mize Alam. Ask, who is this lad? Alam is a lad. Hasam Karlinar, Hachik Karli Alam. Over there he was called a lad. Over here he's called Alam, which is also a lad, but it's a different word. Hachik Karmalei. Halachan Alma Mimach. What he meant to say was to ask, because nis alma means forgotten, was concealed. The halacha is concealed. Say you shall be base medrash. Go ask in the base medrash what the halacha is. Shal, he asked. They told him what the halacha is. So actually, Doeg kalhani kushaisa. So Doeg was that advisor to Shal, asks all the questions. When they're quiet again. They wanted to make a announcement that he's puzzled. David. Miad v'amasa ben ish ushma Yisra Yisraeli Ashaboel Abigail bas Nachash uksiv Yisra Yishmaeli. This person that's Amasa, the son of a man whose name is Yisra Yisraeli. He's gonna make. He steps up and he says something, but there's another pasuk in Divrei Hayamim in Chronicles where he's not called Yisra Yisraeli. He's called Yeser Hayishmaeli. Just the difference over there with a mem and an ayin versus a resh. Well, Amar, and he said, I'm sorry, Rava says about this discrepancy. That means this teaches us that he took out his sword like an Arab. Amar, anyone that doesn't listen to my teaching will be pierced with the sword. I've heard from the Bezdin of Shmuel that it's only the men. That's our tradition. Can you believe him in this scenario? When do we believe a Talmud Chacham when he makes an announcement that he has a tradition? That's only before the case happened. But after the case happens, after the story, then we don't believe him. If he wanted to tell us this halacha, he should have said it before. So Shani Hacha over here, the Shmuel Beistine Kayam. Shmuel is still alive. We could go ask. So therefore, we're going to believe him. Mikol Makam Kasha. But what about all the questions that we said from Dayeg that they should have gone out? The women should have gone out to feed the women. We say that the daughter of the honor of a princess is to stay inside. Yeah. Yeah, there's a very good book. It's called Ruth. Not the Bible, but it's a book it's from the Maggid, the Maggid series of the Koran publishers. So the book on Ruth is a very good book. So over there, it's a woman that's teaching this. She says that why was the book of Ruth written? Gives us two reasons. One is to teach us kindness, because of how kind Ruth was, and also to show us the lineage of David that he's accepted. So she puts the two things together, and her comment is that why was David's lineage accepted? Because the problem was that maybe the people of Moab are not kind. So what we prove over here is that David his lineage is accepted from Ruth because Ruth was kind, and Ruth, her ancestors were kind as well, but they didn't go out to give the food and drink. But that was only the men. So it's teaching us the kindness all the way back to the women of back then. That it's in truth the women of Moab are actually kind. It's only the men that weren't kind, and that's why David has the lineage. So both aspects to show us kindness and to show David's lineage. It's the lineage of kindness. Anyway, okay.
Oh, but the women didn't go out.
The women didn't go out, but it wasn't because they were cruel. It was because they were modest. Yeah. And we see this also by Sarah. They said, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And she was in the tent. Okay. Let's leave it over here.
Great job.